Excel accounting practice problem, financial statement creation. Get ready, because it's time to excel. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. In prior presentations, we constructed the Excel worksheet from a blank sheet, now using it in order to enter transactions. 2 tabs down below, example and practice. The example tab in essence being an answer key. Let's take a look at it now. So in prior presentations, we've been entering the beginning transactions, imagining that this is our beginning balances that we want to enter into the system, start entering new transactions from that point forward. We have entered the inventory, the accounts receivable, and the accounts payable into our trial balance. Now we want to start to think about constructing the financial statements as we go. Obviously, the only financial statement thus far is in essence going to be the balance sheet, because we don't have any income statement activity yet. We put that all the way to the right on our worksheet. We're going to be constructing it way over here, which means we're going to practice hiding cells to get way over here to take a look at the construction of our balance sheet. Let's go back on over to the practice tab, and then I'm going to hide some cells. I want to hide some cells so I got my trial balance right next to where we're going to be constructing the financial statement. So I'm going to put my cursor on the skinny column, the skinny J. Skinny J. I knew a skinny J one time. He's still pretty skinny, but he's not as skinny as he used to be. So in any case, we're going to go over here to BZ. We're going to right click and we're going to hide those. So we're going to hide that, hide. And so now we got this side by side. Let's make this another skinny, a skinny CA, skinny California, skinny CA. California's huge. It's not skinny, but whatever. Here we go. We're going to say then it's going to be the balance sheet. Balance sheet. And then let's make some of it just black up top, so we have some items just to note that that's the heading. So I'm going to make that our standard black and white for the header. Black and white. So there we go. And then we'll typically have just the assets, liabilities, and equity, which we could stack on top of each other, or we can do a side by side. And so a lot of software will stack it like the assets on top and then the liabilities and equity on the bottom, because that's a nice vertical analysis when you're in a situation where your screen is kind of, you're scrunching space this way. But oftentimes people like to see it where it's sprawled out, where the assets equal the liabilities and equity, so you can see two sides of kind of like a big T account. So I'm actually going to construct it that way with the assets on the left, liabilities and equity on the right. So let's start. We're going to have the assets here, and we might want to make that as a color. I'm going to make it like this same formatting by paintbrush in that green. Put that green on my paintbrush and put it right there. And then we're going to say we usually have a subcategory of current assets. Those are going to be more liquid assets. So, and in accounting software, it'll often name the account types as current assets. So in other words, if I was to put these accounts into software, like a QuickBooks software would have a special name for the checking account and the cash accounts, and because it wants to have a ledger, but they would also be a current asset type of accounts. Accounts receivable would have a special account, but also a current asset. I believe inventory then would simply be under the designation of an account type of a current asset type of account generally. But they're all going to be current assets. And note, I don't need a special subcategorization for like the checking account in our worksheet, because it's just a current asset, which really should go under basically cash. We should even rename it under financial accounting to just call it, this should be grouped up in the category of cash. But we're going to call that the checking account. We don't need another category for accounts receivable. It's just a current asset. If you see subcategories of these accounts other than current assets in software, it's probably because the software is using these accounts in a different way, needs to have special uses for those accounts, therefore creating another category that's not usually on a financial statement as a subcategory type of account. Okay, in any case, we're going to say this is going to be cash equal to the cash. And so do I want to build this whole thing out? Let's just add all the accounts here. Then this one's going to be the accounts receivable. I was going to build it as we go, but let's just build the whole thing out. Accounts receivable. And then this one is also a current asset on the inventory. So then I'm gonna make this cell a little bit larger between the CB and the CC, make it a bit larger, and we're gonna call that total current assets. And let's do our indentation stuff here. So I'm gonna say that this is current assets, meaning it's a subcategory indicated by the colon. I'm also gonna show it's a subcategory by indenting it. going to the alignment group and indenting it. And then I'm going to show it's a subcategory by putting my information into an inner column, which I'll sum up in the outer column. Bit overkill on the fact that it's going to be current. And I'm going to pick up that 0, which will pick it up and change once we complete it. Going to say this is going to be equal to the 20,500, and this one's going to be equal to the 2896. And then I'll underline it here. Home tab, font group, underline. Let's do another indentation on the total down here. Alignment, indentation. And then we'll sum up in the CD column. CDs are almost obsolete these days, aren't they? Because now we got like other stuff, streaming stuff. I don't even use my CD player anymore. Whatever. I had a cassette player once. Any case, let's do the next one. Then we're going to say that's the total current assets, and then we could just have the total assets because we don't have any long-term. Oh yeah, we got property, plant, and equipment. So let's say property, plant, let's just say plant and equipment, and colon. Now the property, plant, and equipment might be called depreciable asset. It might just be called fixed assets. This is something that would have a separate category, as you can see in normal financial statement reporting, and software will often call it something different. So if I was to add these accounts into the accounting software, they would probably need to be categorized with a special asset category type like fixed assets or PP&L or depreciable assets or something like that. So this is going to be then equal to the furniture and equipment, and then the accumulated depreciation. Now note that if you don't have account numbers in software, funny things could happen, and that these two might be under the category of property and plant and equipment or fixed assets, and then be in alphabetical order, put in the accumulated depreciation first, furniture and equipment second. That's ugly. That shouldn't happen, because it should be the other way around. It shouldn't go that way. It shouldn't go that way. That's not how things should be. But that's kind of the limitation if you don't have the account numbers. You can fix that with basically account numbers in software. Obviously, when we construct our statements, we can kind of fix that as we construct it. Also realize that if you're kind of mirroring what has been constructed from an accounting standpoint, and you're doing like year-end adjustments or something like that, and you're trying to format your trial balance to what is in the system, you probably want to list your information not on the financial statements, but when you enter their information into a trial balance in the same funny order. You're going to look at it and say, that's ugly. I don't want to enter it like backwards or whatever if this was on top or something. But you want to start with that as your starting point, because when you try to adjust their books again, try to tell them to make adjustments, that's the order they're going to see things. So in other words, if you're going to adjust your trial balance, I probably should have put this one on top, because that's how it's going to show up in the QuickBooks software. That's generally how you want to do it. You don't want to adjust their ledgers in your worksheet, until you actually make the adjusting entries, to it, because you'd like to give it back to them in the same order that they have. Okay, so in any case, we're going to then, let's make this one a little bit larger here again, make that larger again. And then we'll bring this into the inner column. This is going to be equal to this one, the furniture and equipment, and the accum ACC depre, and then this is just going to be the total property, plant, and equipment tab, outer column, equals the sum of those two numbers, underlining this number by going to the font group and underline, doing some indentation, selecting these items by going to the home tab, alignment, indent those por favor, and then we'll indent this one again, alignment and indent once again. And then we're going to have down here in the total, this will be the total assets, which we're just going to sum up the outer column now, just summing up the outer column, because now we got our subcategories of the current and the property, plant, and equipment. So I'll just say equals the SUM, the most popular function ever, for good reason too. It should be the most popular. It's not just a fluke. So we're going to say we'll have those two. And then let's make this one a skinny. Let's make that one a skinny column. And then over here, we're going to have the liabilities and the equity on the other side. So we're going to say this is going to be liabilities. And maybe I don't need the colon because I'm going to yellowify it. And then let's make that a yellow. Put that yellow on my paintbrush. Home tab. Dipping that paintbrush into the yellow paint bucket so I can paint it right there. Painted it yellow. And then we got the current liabilities, colon, which is going to be equal to the accounts payable. All these are current. Well, the loan payable we'll say that's long term, the loan payable. So this is going to be current. Let's make this cell larger. It's not too skinny already, but we're going to make it wide. This is a wide cell. It's a fat cell. So here we go. This is equal. I don't want to call it a fat cell, but it's certainly not skinny. So that's going to be the 15,000. And then this is going to be equal to the Visa, which nothing is in there yet. So this is going to be, we always want to say negative because I want to flip the sign from this negative credit to actual, we don't have debits and credits over here because it's assets equal liabilities plus equity, the accounting equation. And so that's going to give us total current liabilities. I think this is spelled wrong. I fixed it. Don't worry, I fixed it. Current liabilities. What about the 100 other things you spelled wrong? Whatever. My spelling's, it is what it is. So we're going to go to the Home tab, Alignment, indent this one. And then we'll indent this one again. Alignment, indent again. Let's put an underline here by going to the font group and underline. And then we'll sum this in the outer column. Equals the sum, otherwise known as the SUM. Summing it up. So there we go. Now let's pick up the equity side of things. Now notice this is total liabilities. Well, let's put the long-term liabilities down here as well. So let's say that we'll have long-term liabilities, colon, which just all we have right now is this one in the long term, which nothing's there, but we're thinking that loan payable is going to happen at some time. And I'm going to say negative of that 0 to pick it up when it does happen. When it does happen, we're going to be picking that thing up. Now, when you only have one thing in the category, I might just call this total liabilities and just put it in the outer column. But I want to make a subcategory in the same fashion because we might have more liabilities in there. So I'm going to call this then total long-term liabilities. Check. And then we'll say that equals that 0. Put an underline there because we need to emphasize it. A line underneath, also known as the underline. Home tab, alignment, indentation. Once again, alignment, indentation. That's going to give us the total liabilities, IES. Summing it up, once again, the trusty sum function. Trusty sum, once again, coming to our rescue. Rescue us, sum function. Font group, underline, and then we got the total. Hold on a second. Then we got the equity section. Equity, we're going to have just a sole proprietorship, so we only got that one basically account. If it was a sole proprietor, we're going to call it equity. You might call it capital, but also, or owner's equity, you might call it. And if it was a corporation, you might have retained earnings and then common stock, breaking those two things out. But total equity you could think about as kind of like the same. Remember that equity kind of represents what the owner has in the company, or in other words, what the assets allocated to the owners in essence is, as opposed to third-party liabilities. And then you have to think about how you're going to break that out amongst the owners, which if there's only one, which would be a capital account. But if there's like 2 or more, partnership, for example, you got to break it out between the partners to say who has claim, and so on. And then if it's the corporation, then you got shares that are basically all the same kind of ownership distribution. So you could just call it retained earnings, one chunk, which the shares represent a uniform chunk of it. And then the common stock, which is basically the investment versus the earnings that have been accumulated and retained. All right, so let's paintbrush that one. Pulling out the paintbrush and putting it in the blue bucket. Home tab, paintbrush, put some blue on it. Put some blue. That's a wonderful looking blue. And we're just going to paint that right there. Woo, that's nice. Okay, so then we're going to say this is going to be the equity account. Equity account. I'm just going to put this right in the total column because I don't need any subcategories here because we only got one equity account. So I'll just put that in the total, and we might just call it total equity. I'll just keep it with equity. And then we're going to say the total is going to be the total liabilities and equity. Summing this up, we're going to sum this up then, which is going to be equals the SUM sum function of the 15,000 and the 8396, which should equal this number when we're done. This is, so a little suspense here before I hit enter. Little suspense. Hold on. Here we go. And there it did. It did it. It did just what we saw, just what we planned it should do. The very thing we planned to happen has indeed actually happened. What a coincidence. So I'm going to underline here, font group and underline. And then let's put an underline, a double underline here by going to the font group and double underline that one. So that looks good. Is there any more formatting stuff? I can put an underline here. Let's put the double D underline here. And then the one underline there. So that looks good. And then that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Is there anything I'm missing? Do you guys see something I'm missing? I probably misspelled something, right? Let me check my spelling. See if it says I misspelled something. I'm going to say ignore that. I don't think that's a problem. Spell check says it's okay. All right, that's good enough for me. And then we're going to make this blue. Let's make this blue for font's sake, for formatting's sake. Font group, we'll put the borders around it, all the borders, all border. And then the blue, which is that blue right there, which I can find right here by going to that blue, just like the accounting is fun, or the Excel is fun guy used to say. And then I can move this one over. I can put that on my paintbrush. Paintbrushy that one right here. Let's paintbrush this one over. Paintbrush that black to right there. And let's make this our blue and bordered. Blue and border. Font group, border blue. Border blue. And then do that here, border blue. Border blue. There we've got that. And then let's put this balance sheet in the middle. So I can put it in the middle by selecting this whole thing. And we could go to the home tab alignment and do that, which is what most people would do. But then you got that one large cell, which messes other things up sometimes. So I don't recommend it personally. I'm going to undo that. The better way, mucho mejor, is going to go down to the format cells here. When you got that whole thing selected, alignment, as we've seen in the past, the horizontal alignment, a center across the selection, and OK. There it is. So we get kind of a similar result. So there we have it. And we can double check that to this trial balance if you formatted this trial balance this way, which is the best way to do it, personally, if I do say so myself. And that means that you can add this whole thing up and see that you're in balance. You can add these up and just say that that confirms what's in my asset area. And then we got the liabilities, which I can confirm here, which is quite easy because there's only one account in it. And you can see that the liabilities and equity, if I sum them up, 23,396 adds up to the 23,396. I don't need to do any adding and subtracting. Subtract one column from the other column and blah, blah. It's really easy if you set it up in this debits positive, credits negative on the trial balance to then convert that to the financial statements, being able to check every subtotal along the way much more easily than you could if you had them broken out with this basically 2 columns, or in this worksheet would have 6 columns, right? And then you got to add in together the debits and credits and so on.